Good morning, everybody. It's Friday. Welcome to the weekend, and lovely to see you. And thank you for joining us for our Bible reading for today as we continue our wonderful adventure through the wonderful book of the Psalms. And thank you for being with us today. Friends, today we're in Psalm 13. And I've said many times before, so when it comes to Bible reading, when you read the Bible, don't just read it with your head, feel it with your heart. Got to remember, especially the Psalms were originally a hymn book, therefore they were written to music and would have had a sort of, therefore, had a kind of emotional accompaniment as well. But when you read the Psalms, when you read the Bible generally, but the Psalms especially, try and feel it with your heart as well as read it with your head. Don't just try and pick the meaning out of it, but try and kind of feel what's going on. And today's reading is one of those where that's really very much the case. So without further ado, I shall get straight into the wonderful Psalm 13. Here goes. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I bear pain in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day long? How long shall my enemy exult over me? Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Give light to my ears, or I will sleep the sleep of death, and my enemy will say, I have prevailed. My foes will rejoice because I am shaken. But I trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay. As I said, feel this with your heart. That's the way to get into this psalm. Recognize also the psalm is in two bits. There's verses 1 to 4 and there's verses 5 to 6. They're completely different. It's almost like it goes from minor to major key, that kind of thing. It goes from being difficult to being rejoicing very, very quickly. But let's do the first 4 verses first. Again, like I said, feel this with your heart. 4 times in verses 1 and 2, David says, how long, O Lord? Now, this is why you've got to feel it with your heart. When he says, how long, O Lord, he doesn't mean, I'm looking at 3 days, 45 hours, 10 minutes and 40 seconds. He's not looking for a literal, chronological, how long, O Lord? This is a cry from the heart. How long, O Lord, is going to happen? If you want a typical example of this, Martin Luther King used similar kind of language when he was talking about, how long, O Lord, must things be as they are? How long till things are going to change? It's a cry from the heart here. As I say, it's not looking for a chronological, to give it to in hours and minutes. It's not like that at all. What he's talking here is it's a massive cry from the heart. David's got problems. And he's crying out to God. And like I said, it's not a head thing, it's a heart thing. He's crying with his heart. And he's saying 4 things to God. And these are things that we can all understand in our lives from time to time. He starts us by saying, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? And let's be honest, have we not all been at that place at some point in our lives? We can feel very small, we can feel very insignificant. Sometimes we can feel it. We can feel as though God has turned his back on us. We can feel as though, the world seems like a big place and we're not very important and we can be forgotten about and we're just one of many and Lord, you've got lots of people to look after and blah, 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 we get this kind of thing. And I'm sure we've all felt at some point in our lives, God, have you forgotten me? Are you going to hide your face from me forever? And it kind of reminds me of the story of Jesus when he stilled the storm, when he went in the boat with his disciples. And the squall came down. There's almighty storm across the lake, and the disciples are worried. We're going to drown. And Jesus is fast asleep, and they wake him up saying, "Do you not care that we're about to drown?" This is Mark's version. And Jesus stands up and rebukes the sea and says, "Where's your faith?" Basically, the point I'm making is that we not all at times feel a bit like David says in the psalm, how long will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face? We've all been there at some point in our lives. Then he goes on to talk about a bit deeper. He talks about so he's supposed to talk about how long will you forget me? Then he goes on to say, how long must I have pain in my soul and sorrow in my heart? Again, you can kind of feel the emotion of this. David's really hurting here. This isn't just a minor setback. David's in real inner turmoil here. David's really struggling. He's got pain in his heart and sorrow in his soul. He's really struggling here. And again, likewise, we need to recognise that we've got God in our lives and we serve a living Saviour and so on. But life is tough sometimes. God never said that living life his way was an easy way, but he did say he'd be with us when it happened. And, David, again, as I say, maybe a feeling that we can all feel sometimes. He feels pain in his soul and sorrow in his heart all the day long, day and night. And so David's really hurting here. So you got David here, firstly, as I say, feeling as though he's been forgotten about God. Secondly, he's got pain in his soul. Thirdly, he goes on a bit deeper. He goes on to talk about, can you give light to us, or I will sleep the sleep of death. In other words, David's situation here is critical. He is concerned that this situation might get the better of him, that he might die. And again, that can be how we are sometimes. And sometimes we can feel as though so many things, how long, oh Lord? I mean, you can kind of, my faith is hanging on in there. And I think we can feel that way at times, how long, oh Lord? Just give me some light. Otherwise, these things are going to get the better of me. And I think sometimes we can feel that way. Sometimes we can feel as though, how much longer? I don't know how much more of this I can really take. The Bible does say, however, that we're not tempted beyond what we can bear, but we're always given a way to path to go through it. Book of Hebrews. But nonetheless, I'm sure we've all felt at some point, like they did on the boat, as though, are we going to keep our heads above water here? That are these things going to get the better of us? And finally, of course, the other thing he feels with his heart as well is that he feels the gloating of his enemies. Lest the enemies say, I have prevailed, and rejoice because I am shaken. He's also worried that the people that are causing him trouble, they might feel as though they've won. They might almost feel as though they've won a victory over God, or they've won a victory over faith, or whatever, Christian faith or whatever. And again, sometimes we can feel as though, or certainly David felt here, as though the gloating of the enemies, told you so kind of thing. So here you have David, and he's obviously got problems in his life, and he cries out to God. I mean, feel the agony of this. How long, O Lord? And he lays his situation before God. Firstly, he feels as though God's forgotten him. Secondly, he feels pain in his heart. Thirdly, he feels as though these things might well get the better of me. Come on, O God, how long, O Lord? And finally, he's also worried that the enemies are going to gloat over him. Not only is he going to lose, might he lose, but actually he can feel the gloating of the enemies against him as well. Despite the fact he's been faithful to God. So he brings this whole lot before God, feelings that we've all felt from time to time, and he comes and he can feel it. How long, O Lord? And then after verse 4, there is a complete change. Now we don't know what's happened in between verses 4 and 5. I mean, it could be that a bit of time has passed and things have improved. Maybe God has, maybe God has done something. We don't know. There's some thought that in liturgy, somebody might have come in with some encouraging words or something, or it could be, and I think this is the case, that sometimes just bringing our situation before God is enough. Sometimes when our minds are so full of our issues, which is quite understandable, it's difficult. We can lose a bit of focus in our faith, but sometimes just to be reminded of the fact that God is good, just to be reminded of the fact that God is great, and sometimes just to be reminded of something like, God's been faithful throughout my life already. He isn't going to let me down now. You just be reminded of it, almost just to bring the situation before God. Sometimes that can be enough, and so that's what I think. I mean, various other things may have happened, I don't know, but something happens. But after he's brought his situation, after he's come before God with how long, O Lord, and at the end he comes up with a statement of faith. But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he's dealt bountifully with me. So by coming before God and saying, how long, O Lord, just bringing it before God, reminding himself of God's faithfulness, reminding himself of God's love, may well have been enough. But bringing ourselves before God each day reminds us that however big our problems are, we have a God who's bigger. And yes, sure, sometimes we do all feel as though, if we're honest, that God's forgotten us. Sometimes we can feel deep pain in our soul. Of course we do. Sometimes we can feel as though these things are going to get the better of us. Sometimes I'm sure we all feel as though we don't want to lose, sort of let the side down, and we don't want to worry about gloating of people that disagree with us and the world and so on and so on and so on. We've all felt all these things from time to time. But let's bring, like David did, let's bring them before God, good, bad, and ugly, just as they are. Bring it honestly before God, and let's bring it into his presence. And let's be reminded that, as I said, however big our problems are, we have a God who's bigger. God bless you. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget, if you can, if you remember, to share the messages and other people. Some people have been sharing recently, and it's improved the coverage. So thank you for that. But if you can do, just share it at the bottom. If whatever, have a lovely weekend. God bless you. Thank you for being with us.